Welcome to the Node.js Community Build Workgroup meeting for January the 6th. And we're going to follow our standard agenda as pulled based on tags in the community repo. Start at the announcement, if there are any announcements from the team to make people aware of things that are going on.
I was just looking at some Raspberry Pi issues. We may need to take the Raspberry Pis off for a little while. There's some weird stuff going on with disk.
Okay, Rod, looking at Raspberry Pi. When you say take them offline, like for a prolonged amount of time, or?
No, just until I have the time to fix them, because I don't know, there's no space errors, and that's just, it's not true. It's one of those things that's hard to diagnose, and not sure I have the time to really figure it out right today anyway.
Okay, so what? So it's just maybe yeah, okay. Took notes along those.
I just don't want it to be distracting for people running CI, and if it keeps on failing, that's just not helpful.
Sure, if it's going to fail every time, there's no point having them on. So, read. Okay, any others? No. Okay, let's go to the first thing on the agenda, which is I'm not sure which issue it is. I'm just, I didn't tag it on before. Oh, no, that's not what I want to do. Sorry, I don't have the right link for it. Let me just find it. It's down at the bottom here. Okay, it's 1093. Sorry, I'm just updating the minutes as we go. And now I'll open that one up. This is just the Odroid issue that we're having. I thought since we have you, Rod, the C2s, there seem to be some failures on OpenSSL, which were, I think, different from the earlier failures. Like one of the machines was taken offline, but then it seemed to start failing. Now, the question I had to you, Rich, was that like on all machines or just one machine?
I think it was just on that one machine.
Okay, so it may not actually, it may be a machine issue as opposed to, I was worried that that new one might have been an actual compile failure or something like that.
No, I think it was only happening on the dash. There's Odroid -1, Odroid -2, Odroid -3. It was only happening on -3. I'm pretty sure it wasn't happening on 2 or 1.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
There is a bigger problem here, which is that those machines we are having to deal with regularly. Rich is regularly taking them offline for having file system problems, read-only file system, because it has an error. They're turning out to be not that reliable. And Mininodes maintains them for us, and they're always very apologetic because of how unreliable they are. But it's not their fault. It's these machines just seem to be not so reliable. So maybe we want to visit just removing them entirely.
Right, and were they giving us coverage we didn't have otherwise, or it's just that they can do things faster than the Raspberry Pis, or?
They're actually very similar to Raspberry Pi 3s, so it's not giving us that much novel coverage.
Okay.
It was when we first added them, but I think we've got a lot of ARM64 coverage and sort of modern ARM coverage going on now. So it wouldn't be a huge loss to remove them, but it would clear up some maintenance overhead that we can't. It's just persistent. They're just, yeah, frustrating.
I guess
they use SD cards, so that it's not the most reliable of medium. We get
why
around.
Would we not just take them out?
Yeah, coverage, and it's really not that compelling. I mean, it's Ubuntu, which is different, but it's not that different from Debian base, which is on the Raspberry Pis.
Okay, because it sounds like, yeah, I mean, I'd certainly think that. How long have they been in? It's been
over a year.
Okay. I don't know. I guess from what I'm hearing, I wouldn't be too worried about taking them out either, unless you think we have a way to make them stable.
What I'll do, how about if there's no disagreement here, then I'll chat with David from Mini Nodes, and because he knows they're persistently a problem, and I'll just say, look, we're thinking about removing them. We did talk about at one stage about maybe turning them into Android machines, trying some Android testing, but that'd be a difficult step, and we're not officially adding Android support anyway, so we just might say, look, thanks very much for the contribution. They've been good while they've lasted, but we just can't. We've got enough to manage that. These are just frustrating, and he's regularly having to physically reboot and physically re-image them for us as well, so the overhead for him as well. So I'll go chat with him. Unless he has any good ideas for improving the stability, then let's just remove.
Okay. So the minutes I took were, Rod will chat with Dave from Mini Nodes about issues, and if we can't resolve them, we will remove, as we don't have the cycles to keep them up and running. Sound good?
That's good.
Okay. Okay, so the next issue was remove Fedora 22, 23, and 24, issue 962. Rod, you had that one as well?
Did you have from before, or because we did discuss it, and the agreement back then was we'd leave them there and then just replace the older one when new ones came.
Okay. So let me just look at
different.
See, no, I think this is. I'm just taking a look to see if there was anything outstanding, or whether we just forgot to take them off the agenda. So the last comment says, waiting on a reg for proposal, removing from agenda until that's ready. No general objection to removing. I guess I didn't actually remove it off the agenda though.
Oh, okay. So I needed to formalize that proposal, but
yeah, I think just write it down somewhere.
We need to have a document somewhere that actually says what machines we have and what our plan for upgrading is, and even put in dates when we expect new versions to be available. Because I keep on forgetting to look. When's the next Alpine coming? When's the next whatever coming?
Right, and then if we had that, we could even have a like maybe something on our calendar or whatever that says every so often we should look at it.
Yeah.
Because maybe the Foundation calendar would be a good way to get a reminder or something. Okay, so I took off the build agenda, but yeah, Rod, if you still got the action to put together a, just write it down, and I guess in a PR, and then we'll get it in, right? Move tag. Rod has agendas action to PR in proposal. Okay, the next issue is 10.045. CI is not posting. I think, let's see.
So I before we get into that one, into the details, one of the reasons I wanted to move that up is because related to that, we've been having a lot of capacity issues with Jenkins where we get to the point, and I know Rich has noticed this a lot, we get to the point where it just stops accepting new jobs, and it seems to be that it's got a certain amount of jobs in the queue, and then beyond that it just won't formally accept a new job. They go in the background somewhere, and then eventually they'll show up, or sometimes they don't. It's a weird state. And the reason it's related to this, I think, is that all these new post-status update jobs that go through as a separate job actually add to the queue. And so I think one of my theories is, I'm not sure, but one of my theories is that we've extended the queue significantly by adding these extra jobs to do the status updates before and after. They go in as separate jobs, and they go into the queue, and so the queue gets really big really quickly. And then they're quick jobs mostly, but
they usually it's just making a curl request. But
right, so when it gets there, they're quick, but actually getting there is the problem.
Has the capacity issue happened at any of the times with the machine failures, like with the Odroid? That there are some machines where the queue really builds up, and then that causes these downstream problems with the other things.
There's another class, which is that a whole class of machine or a whole label will disappear, and so that has happened with
Yeah.
AIX, and it's happened with a couple other obscure ones where that class has completely disappeared. So there's nothing available. That really clogs things up.
Yeah.
So I think there's two issues combining, maybe. I don't know. I
we
don't
need
know. I don't even know how to properly diagnose this and look at history.
Would it help
becoming
if
more
we
of a
had
problem.
would it help if we had machines dedicated to fast jobs?
Well, we've now got 3 machines for handling Jenkins workspace stuff, and they're essentially fast jobs. And I think the queue on them, they can now handle, is it 30 or 40 simultaneous jobs? So they have
like 40 or
capacity to
50.
do it.
It's a big.
Yeah, and there's 3 of
big.
them, and they're not small machines, and they handle things quite fast. But it's the fact that these jobs get put behind other jobs, even though they might run quick when they get to running. There's something about it's not working how I expect it to work.
Okay, so even though other jobs are going on to different machines, they don't get scheduled. Like, 'cause I could see, say, you've got some type where you're gonna have a bit of a backlog, but these jobs shouldn't have to wait for those because they're not using those same machines, right? But you're saying that Jenkins still doesn't schedule them until the other ones have sort of cleared up.
Actually,
It's always surprising to see those post status update jobs in the queue. They shouldn't be in a queue.
Could the Odroid machines be repurposed to do this if we're thinking about taking them offline? Could they do the curl requests? If we still got the machines?
But it doesn't sound like it's a machine problem, like not a capacity
problem,
it's like
it's the queue issue, because what happens is that the Jenkins workspace boxes start all the other jobs, and then when like a certain type of machine, like Debian hasn't really been an issue, but just an example, if Debian gets backed up, that causes all the Jenkins workspace machines to get backed up and all of that. So if we remove it from the Jenkins workspace queue, because that's where they run right now, then maybe that could help things. I'm not sure. I just came up with that right now.
But yeah, I mean, that was similar to what I was poking at earlier. If we just set up another virtual machine, of any type that had a specific tag that was only used by these posters, because we know that they're, lightweight, we probably wouldn't need much of a CPU. It'd be like one CPU, small amount of memory. Would that help? But I don't know, Rod. It sounded like is it because? Do you think it's because it's those ones that start the main thing are sharing the machine that matters, or is it just that Jenkins overall gets backed up?
It could be this thing about losing machines off a particular label, and it just doesn't have the ability to schedule everything else. Because another time it happens is if there's a lot of these stress test jobs put in. So if there's more than one stress test job happening, and they often get put onto particular machine types, I think they might block up a class of machine, and then that blocks up everything else. So very often I've had to go and clean up Jenkins, and there's stress test jobs in there.
Right. Is it that the job that starts the flow for everything else is basically, doesn't finish until all the other subjobs finish?
Well, it's usually unrelated jobs that get blocked up, which is the strange thing. You can start a stress test, and that's all self-contained in a single job.
Right, but it's more that, I mean, like, say if we've got these 3 machines that launch all the other things, if each of those has a job that continues to run until all the subjobs finish, then anything that blocks any of the jobs they start will end up making it so that there's a lot of jobs on those 3 machines, right?
Yeah, like I know Rich sometimes has to go through and cancel like a ton of stuff. I'm not sure if that's what he's seen or not, but that's like what I've seen sometimes when I have to go through and cancel like a lot of jobs.
Yeah.
So it's almost like, because we didn't used to have those, and we just the primary job would run on anything, didn't it?
No, we try and run it on the master. That's when
we had the one master. Okay. Well, I don't know if these posting jobs are a significant amount. do you think having a separate machine that was tagged just to run those would make any sense?
I just don't know if it'll make any difference. And I'm not saying that they absolutely are to blame. It's just that seems to be one thing that's changed. That
they are just adding more weight to the queue just in general.
Yeah.
So maybe based on how the Odroid conversation goes, we can regroup on that and figure out maybe if that's like a viable option or not.
Another thing maybe I'd like to do here, I have to get off the phone soon, but and there's another discussion we started on GitHub, I think it's in the agenda, which is collecting notes about things that have changed. I'd also like to collect notes on the situations where things get locked up, because we've all had to deal with them in different ways. And and I get in there, but what would be nice to have is context, as much context as possible. What was going on? What did you have to do to fix it? So that when we do a diagnosis in the end, we can look back and say, what are the common things here? Because we're really just guessing here.
We ought to have an issue for each one of those, right?
I guess so.
And then it's a matter of like, okay, what do you do?
I feel like our issue tracker,
our
issue tracker seems overwhelmed. I mean, like it seems like there's like, I mean, maybe that'll work. Maybe new issues tend to bubble to the top, but it seems like there's like, probably dozens and dozens of issues in there that probably can be closed as either they've been fixed or they're never actually going to be addressed. And I don't know if that, I mean, I can't speak for anybody else, but to me, that discourages me from using the issue tracker. I always feel like I'm going to post something there and nothing's going to happen. And, nothing against anybody in the build working group. It just doesn't seem like an effective way to get people's attention.
Yeah, this wasn't to get attention. It was just to document, like, Rod was suggesting we should document each of these issues, incidents effectively, right?
Yeah.
So we could have so if you open the issue, document it and close it, that would effectively be a place to record it unless we can come up with something else.
Sure. And maybe, so I know what you're saying, Rich, because they're often noticed by somebody who's not us. So Rich, you will often notice them and then call for help. And so maybe in doing that, that would trigger you opening an issue where we do we use it for note taking. So I guess what Michael's saying is don't be afraid to open issues for these incidents, and then we can use them to take notes on what we did. Not necessarily to get our attention, because it hasn't been that good a tool, which is another discussion. Look, I have to go. I'm being called away.
Okay. Talk to you later.
Good discussion. Thank you. Bye.
Okay, so I think actually, though, if I look at what the content of this issue is, I'm not sure it's related to that discussion.
Yeah, that was something that he had brought up. I think that's a valid point, though. That's something.
Oh no, yeah. But what I'm thinking is, John, we might need a different issue to cover.
I agree.
And discuss that. Do you want to take the action to open that?
Yeah, I'll open it up.
And like, I don't think I still don't quite think I understand whether having a separate machine or not would help, but like if
it might be something just to try and then see what.
Exactly, right? Like if we spun up one new very small machine somewhere and then change the tag so that those jobs only ran there, I guess we might need more than one, like say two. But anyway, we could start with one and see if it makes a difference or not, kind of thing. So yeah, if you want to capture the discussion there, that'd be great. What was actually in this issue had to do with our Rackspace outage.
Yeah, that was the original thing.
So I think the last issue was that we wanted to make sure we were going to get emails.
Yeah, it seemed like they were trying to contact us or something, and that there was like an issue there. That there was advance warning that there was going to be this like shutdown of the machines, and that we just didn't know about it somehow.
Yeah, the primary contact was somebody internal. And now, what I don't know, I do remember there was a request for a number of us to create accounts, but what I can't remember whether it was Rackspace or not.
Yeah, I think Gibson had created an issue about that.
Okay, so I know I went and created one. So if there's an issue open, so maybe we can close this one and cover it in that issue.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay.
Okay, so do you know which issue that is?
I can locate it later.
Okay, so maybe if you can just paste that into the thing, that would be good. So believe last thing is to make sure we have individual emails. Another issue is open to cover that, and we'll add link closing. Okay, so this will take it off of the agenda anyway. Okay. Okay, so sorry. I'm just going to take a couple minute notes on what we just talked about for this one. Okay, you already did. That's good. I'm just going to say issue related to this one is making sure we have individual emails being covered in a different issue. We'll close this one. Okay. Okay, so moving on, the next issue is 10170, 1070. Please pay careful attention to code running through CI. I know we've discussed this in a previous meeting, and I just want to see what there was for us to, whether we should have taken it off the agenda or there's still something to discuss.
This is just, there are a lot of machines that are not being supported by the creator anymore. Like
Right.
for Fedora, we have multiple versions of that, and I guess we should have brought this up while Rod was here talking about Fedora, but whether or not those should be removed from CI. Because whether or not people run bad code through it, either way, they're not getting a kernel patch.
Right. I mean, I think we should let Rod PRs change in and then remove whatever's covered by that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. There's like a lot of machines. It's almost like 10 or something.
Fedora machines, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I like in our context, I and correct me if I'm wrong, like I don't know what it is that that could be compromised through that attack that we should really be urgently worried about, right? Like, it's obviously we want to do patches and stuff, but I don't see a burning fire. So waiting until we've documented what our process is going to be and then removing this is what makes sense. If people feel otherwise, speak up, please.
I mean, either way, just a general thing is that if the creator isn't putting out new patches for security stuff even, then maybe it's worth considering to retire it from the architect, from our build cluster.
Right, and I think it would be good. Like, hopefully, what Rod PRs in will be a basis for that to say, here's our strategy in terms of, when and how we remove things, and as opposed to just doing it ad hoc.
I agree.
I guess if Rod doesn't get to it in the next month, maybe the rest of us should volunteer too to see if we can chip in on that front. Let's see. Okay, so this one in particular, I think this one can just be closed. Do you think? Or
yeah, I guess maybe there should just be a ticket just in general about how we're removing old machines and stuff, and then maybe even the other Fedora issue, and this one can just be closed in favor of that one. Just how we're going about removing the old machines and criteria. And
do you want to do that?
Yeah. Okay. Sure.
Okay, so I'm going to take it off the agenda, and that I think makes sense to me to have one issue which tracks that, as opposed to this one. You read the title; it doesn't really speak to that issue. Okay. Discussed, and John will consolidate into issue that targets remaining things to do. Okay. Next one, new OSX infra walkthrough. I'm going to propose we defer that. Would like George, also would like Rod to be around because I know he wanted to see that. I know it's been deferred for a little bit, so if people really want us to do something, maybe we should try and set up another time. But I'm proposing we just defer that. A quick update on where we are on that. George we haven't quite landed the Ansible jobs to configure the Mac OS X machines. The last piece is getting the Ccache correct. It seems that whatever we have isn't actually getting things into the path, but it's not obvious why not. So when I run them, they still take 30 minutes, and we expect it to be more like 15 once Ccache kicks in. So once we get that resolved, we'll land those and turn on 10 and 11. But that's where we're at on those. Any other questions before I move on to the next one? Okay, provide read access to our CI node, ci.nodejs.org config. So this is 972. Let me open that guy.
This, I think, was just waiting on Gibson to formulate like a plan about how to actually like go about it, and then just to do it. I'm not sure if there's an action item or not.
Okay, so I think we may want to comment and remove from the agenda if that's the case.
That sounds fine.
Okay, let's see. I think we should go with the policy of all new jobs are stored in source control. Yes, I like that. Okay, I'm going to say removing from build agenda. Can you define this? Gibson, can you define next steps and then add back if when needed? Okay, I'll comment that. Remove from the build agenda. Okay. So the next one is 705, investigate a commit queue.
I think this can be removed from the agenda.
Okay, let's do that now, because
that's been going around for a while. I'm not sure if there's really like an action item on this one.
Okay. No current action item from build agenda based. Okay. Comment. Okay, next issue is 515. File and directory names for downloads.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. Hello.
Hey, so I don't know if I'm supposed to lead the discussion on the topic or not. But
Probably a good idea.
cool. So basically, we've been exploring ways to, in the version management working group, ways to like just approach the whole problem set. And we kind of all roughly agree that one nice first step could be coming up with a agreed upon scheme for where Node lives. And this would be where the default installation of Node goes, where version managers should expect to find a version of Node that's already installed. Obviously, it wouldn't be compulsory or anything, but if Node followed it and if all the version managers followed it, everyone would effectively follow it. So the idea being that if NVM is used to install Node 8 and Node 6, that a specific version of them, that N would be able to locate those same versions in those places. And similarly, if I had installed a version of Node with the default installer, or with the normal like make install thing, that version of Node would be installed in a place that then later nvm ls would report as it being installed. So whereas currently everything kind of has to manage its own locations, and so you end up with different copies of Node in different unpredictable places. So the issue is essentially about exploring that. Like, let's see, is there a way that we could come up with a general kind of concept that that we could all share, and that all the official tools could use, would include, that would be designed in such a way that all the version managers could easily rely on it.
Right. Now that makes sense to me. In terms of, is it related? Like, were you also thinking about, like, does it sound like what you just described is like where it would be installed on the target machines, right?
Yes.
You were also
like a file path.
Did I miss at the beginning? Were you also talking about where you'd find the binaries to install themselves, or is that a different issue?
That's, at the moment, the only official answer to that question is nodejs.org/dist. So
Right.
I think that is also a useful thing to agree upon, but I think that that's a kind of a secondary and less important issue, because like the way NVM handles it is it just says give me a URL if you want to override it, and that has to have an index.tab that follows this format, and then that tells me where to get the binaries. So like the de facto standard is kind of what Node already does.
Okay, so that's not really a current problem.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Okay.
So I see Rich made a comment. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I just going to read my comment. So just like,
Cool.
can the version management group propose these standard file paths, and then and then the other, because it's not clear to me that, I mean, build creates the installers, so they have to be updated if it's going to change on anything. But it's not, as John just posted, not sure if that's really under Build's jurisdiction to decide anyway. But the version management group proposes it, and Build says, sure, sounds good to us, and TSC sounds good to us. And then it's, pull request is open, and all the collaborators who want to comment say, looks good to me. Then, then that's probably the cleanest path to getting something standardized, if that works for.
That sounds. Yeah, I mean, I think as long as the general, like, as we're all kind of roughly on the same page, that we think this is a good idea, and that as long as we come up with some sort of naming scheme that is amenable to all the stakeholders, that it's something we'd go forward, then I think it's worth the investment of time for the version management group to actually come up with a concrete proposal, and I think that would be the next step.
Yeah, I think people would be on board with this. I mean,
cool.
Of course, you're only talking to 4 people here today, but I think it makes sense to, for everybody. I mean, I imagine this is for the system binary, and if you're like, doing the thing with NVM where you're installing it just for you, it goes someplace else in your home directory or whatever, and that's probably not going to be standardized. Although I guess you could if you want to.
Yeah, I don't see why it couldn't be somewhere under your home directory. That would actually be not bad.
Of course it's going to be under your home directory, but the question is whether it's a standard location on your home directory. But that's like really not at all Build's concern. That's really.
Well, I think that is part of what we would suggest, is that there would be a per user like home base, and then there would be a system wide home base. And within that, we would try to kind of sort of mandate the substructure, the paths within them of where each version lived. And the idea would be that NVM, N, Nave, Homebrew, the default node installers, the like what happens when you type, configure, make, install, like all of those things would roughly put the files in the places they expected. And then the part of the proposal would include ways that those can be customized and overridden. So, and people can continue to do what they want.
And then I guess one issue would be, how do version managers deal with, old locations, backwards compatibility, which just, to me, just means all the more reason for the version management group to figure it out, because you're going to be dealing with the fallout.
Absolutely.
I just want to clarify real quick. There's no issue right now with nodejs.org/dist as far as like the actual tarballs to be able to pull them down, right? That's not part of the thing that's being
Correct.
tackled here?
I think that
Okay.
is fine as
Okay.
is.
Yeah, so then I just want to echo that the build working group can help review the changes in Node.js/Node, where it sounds like that's where the issue is. Okay, I just wanted to clarify that there was nothing that was part of this that involved like the website or anything.
Yeah, I think the build group is just, it seemed like the better place to start the conversation more than anything else. I agree that it's
no
not,
problem.
yeah, there probably, hopefully won't be much work for anyone to do except altering a few paths. But like,
Yeah,
I want to make
exactly.
sure all the stakeholders are involved to, review it.
Cool.
Yeah,
I
and
just
I
wanted
guess-
to clarify.
And of course, if the path that the official installers are going to install into is going to change, then that's going to probably raise a lot of questions about how do we deal with the change in backwards compatibility and legacy installations and stuff like that. But again, that it seems like the version management group is probably the right people to think about that stuff anyway. So I would say,
Yeah, I mean, certainly for NVM, I'll need some sort of way to migrate from my current locations to the standard one. And I'm sure all the others will have to figure out a path as well. So awesome. Okay,
Yeah,
well, then thanks everybody.
I'll just add in, yeah, I was going exactly the same way as what Rich was saying. So it sounds like we're all in agreement. Good idea, and we look forward to seeing the suggestion.
Awesome, thanks. I'll ping everybody when I have something concrete.
cool. Thanks, Jordan.
Yep, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, that's what we had on our official agenda. I had one thing we might discuss, but anybody else have any other things we might want to add on to the discussion?
Rich, did you want to talk about the idea to create a new place to track issues with flaky tests and that type of stuff?
I don't have any concrete ideas other than I think it's a good idea to do that. But did
Yeah,
you?
No, I didn't really have anything in mind either. I just wanted to bring it up that I feel like what we have right now is not doing a good job of keeping track, that this stuff in like Node.js Node, this stuff in Node.js Build, it's kind of like all over the place. And then the stuff in the chat, it's like hard to keep track of it all.
Right. And then there's probably tests that should be marked in the status files that aren't, and things like that. That should really, but yeah. I don't know if we have enough time today to talk about this. I definitely have a hard stop at the top of the hour, but that's something we should probably talk about soon.
I just wanted to throw it out there.
Yeah, I think we have a bit of time. So are you thinking about like a way to make it easier for people to report a flaky test, or?
And then to have people come and be able to fix it, because they're like logged in multiple different locations, and it's hard for people that want to try and help fix, whether it's a problem with the hardware or like wherever, to go after it.
Yeah, it's not that there's a barrier to reporting. It's just that there's not one true location to look. Like, you could look in the status files. You could look in the node issue tracker. You could look in the build issue tracker. And sometimes there's tests that just aren't even documented in any of those places. I mean, I would like to see. I guess just thinking extemporaneously, or just I guess what I would like to see is. Tests that are flaky should have an issue in the node issue tracker with the CI flaky tag, and any tests that are flaky should be marked as such in the status files, and that the status file should include a comment with a link to that issue. So there's my proposal.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds reasonable. Every time I come across one, I open a new issue, say I think it's intermittent, but if there is a tag that I should be using, I didn't know about it.
One big obstacle, one huge obstacle, I think, is that a lot of times we're not sure if a test is flaky itself or if it's failing because something is weird with the particular machine in CI. And then there's also the cascading failures where, like, especially like something like inspector, if an inspector test fails, it can sometimes cause a cascade of other tests to fail.
Sure. Yep.
Holding on to the default port. So like what to do in situations like that, like sort of like how to figure out if a test is truly flaky or not is a thing that probably needs to be documented. And
yeah. Because, you want to be able to, because what I typically do is I'll search on the name of the test. And if that doesn't hit, then it's like, okay, I better open a new issue. But if it's hard to figure out what you would be searching on in example that you just have.
Well, what you just described is my process as well.
Right. You know, if I don't find the name of the test, I figure, okay, there's no issue, open one. It sounds like maybe we should just write that, like, is the first step just writing that down and putting it somewhere? Collaborator guide or something like that?
Maybe. I think and in fact, I think there already is something like that in there, but we should look. But a second issue is that, you know, I mean, this is honestly related, I think, but I don't think we should land code when there's red CI. I think, you know, but that requires a huge cultural shift. I think if CI is red, you got to rerun what was red, and I think what we're seeing is like we're getting a lot of new tests. Well, we're getting a small number of new tests that are problematic, and we're not seeing that we're landing them because, you know, we're used to, you know, landing red CI, and which, you know, and then what happens is, you know, as you know, and then so like we have one or two tests that are problems, and then we just start landing more, and it compounds the problem. And when you have like 4 unreliable tests, you know, it doesn't make things 4 times as hard to figure out what's going on. It makes it, you know, much harder than
right.
that.
Now, I you know, from what I've experienced, I could see that not being that hard except for like ARM.
Yeah, like there are certain types of machines that fail more often. Like the Ubuntus are not failing usually. The Debians usually aren't failing. It's some of like the outlier-ish platforms, like the not core platforms that fail sometimes.
Yeah, which ones would you have in that set?
So we have tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 designated. This group has designated it. We could just say that, like, you know, I mean, I don't think any of the regular failures tend to be in the tier 1s, except for maybe Windows.
Does that add friction to people that they have to figure out if it's tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 to be able to land?
All this stuff is going to have friction. Yeah.
Well,
I'm not even sure I like that though, because if you take that to its logical conclusion, you'll effectively have no testing on any of those. That's
true.
Like it's the challenge I see is that, like, say ARM. Well, often I'll go on ARM and it's like, okay, it's an infra issue, right? And those take quite a long time to rerun. So, you know, if you said, okay, you have to rerun it and get that green, that may cause a bunch of friction. Most of the other ones, it's less common, I think. What's your guys' experience?
Yeah, like also in general, the ones that usually fail more often are the ones that take longer to run. So that's like worse even, because you can't even try and get it back green because the tests take like 30 minutes, 40 minutes to run. So you can't even like try out a few things all at once. That's just from my experience.
Right. So I guess like, Rich, so say, you know, there were some examples where I had a doc PR and I found one of the ones that failed. It was, you know, I opened an issue that said intermittent because, you know, I was pretty sure it wasn't going to be a persistent failure. Is a suggestion that we should like rerun to make sure that you have green the next time, or what would we handle? Like, how would we handle that kind of case where you're like 99% sure it's unrelated? It is tagged.
It should never be allowable to ignore red CI, period. No exceptions. That's the rule we need.
Hear, hear.
So basically you'd say rerun, and if you can get it to be green, you could land.
And you should open it, and you should open an issue.
And then
open an issue is like
if the previous red was a build failure, open it in the build working group and copy and paste everything in.
Yep.
And if it was a flaky test, then open it in the main repo and copy everything in.
Right. And if I guess that just means the main thing would mean is you'd have to rerun.
We will never get buy-in on this from everybody else until we get CI back to yellow. And that right now is the main challenge because it has been red for like weeks now.
Right. Well, should we be? I mean, the other thing is at some point we could say it's been read too long, we need a pause.
TSC would have to say that, I think. I don't think.
I don't think, but I meant we could make a suggestion that says this has gone on for too long. We need to get it back to the, once it's green, we can reopen the floodgates, but we need time. That doesn't seem unreasonable to me either.
No, me either.
I mean, that seems fine. I feel like that would require a large amount of buy-in. And what would happen if when you took it off, more red stuff ended up being created? That's another issue.
Yeah, I guess I'm just thinking through, there's different sort of levels. You could get to the point where it's like, no, if there's red, you don't land, right? And personally, I kind of like that. But I also see the challenges in getting general enough consensus. So one step back from that is that we have a standard way of, and it's acceptable to say, well, wait a sec, it's been X amount of time, we haven't got it back to green, therefore we should, basically say, whoa, the focus needs to be getting it green, and then we can start landing things again. And the question is, do you think that would be an easier thing to get buy-in for?
Yeah, maybe it makes sense just to kind of table it here and then just open up an issue where we can keep talking about it, because I feel like more than just the three of us should be
yes,
conversation.
And I would almost, Rich, do you think it belongs in the build working group for discussion, or in, say, the TSC one, or in the Node one even?
Maybe keep it in build to figure out what build thinks, and then after that, open it up to a larger audience. I feel like that might be better. I'm not sure. Because it's on build, at least as far as the machine problems go, to be able to fix those.
Yeah, that seems like a reasonable approach. This is the issue, and I wrote this up someplace else, and I can't remember where. But the issue that's going to, this approach has the potential to create enormous pressure on the build working group, which is a bunch of volunteers, who have other more important things going on in their lives. And
yeah, that kind of leads into the thing I was going to bring up. We only have 3 minutes, but
no, we don't have 3 minutes. I got to go. I'll talk to you next time.
Okay. The thing I was going to bring up was the concept we discussed in before, is asking the foundation for some sort of funding to help the build working group. I guess hire somebody who would have dedicated time to help resolve some of the issues.
To hire someone from the build working group, or to hire an outside person?
No, it'd be to hire, I think, an outside person to help. That person could then be part of the build working group. The opposition has always been the dynamics of having somebody being hired versus volunteers, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it sort of circles around to, is the build one area where it's a critical enough resource that maybe that's worthwhile?
You could say for social media that the Node Foundation has people that manage that. That's kind of the thing, is CI and the website and that stuff at that same level, where you need a paid employee to keep an eye.
Yeah, it's basically, you often have the situation where you need something resolved now,
quickly, and that's not the way that this works.
And to have somebody you can ping who's available, and that, volunteers just don't work that way, right?
Yeah.
So, it's a special case. Regular development things, it's a different, people can do that on their own time, but this is time sensitive, critical, unblocks a bunch of people. So would it be worthwhile in exploring that?
Yeah.
So maybe we should find or rebring up that issue. I'll take the action.
Does that make sense to, yeah, okay, I guess maybe open up a new issue, and then at the next meeting we can talk about it when there's more people.
Yeah, I'll either find one, because I know that Miles had opened one in the past. I'll either try and find that or open up a new one, because I just all the sort of struggles we're dealing with, I think, feed into that question. So
yeah, I think there was something in a few days, a week ago or something, in Node Dev or Node Build that was about this, that Rich and Miles were talking.
Right.
I'm not sure where it was, but there was something about that a little while ago.
So I will find it and get it back on the agenda and ping people to start, because that's the one thing I can think of that might try and help some of our recent
Yes.
in that front. And then you might get to the point where at least the build side wasn't in the way, right?
Yeah.
Okay, we're pretty much at time. So I don't know if anybody else has anything else to talk about. Otherwise, we'll reconvene and through GitHub.
Yep.
Nothing else from me.
I'm all
Okay.
set.
Thank you. I
All right.
will, and thanks
you.
for everybody who was listening. We'll talk to you next time. Bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
Michael. Bye.